In the first part, we witnessed the impossible victory of a boy king struck with leprosy who defied Saladin at Montgisard and carved his name into legend. But Baldwin Ivy's story does not end with triumph. In this second part, the sands of the Holy Land grow darker. The Leper King, his body broken but his spirit unyielding, faces an even greater enemy, not just the Sultan at his gates, but betrayal within his own walls. Family ambitions, dangerous marriages, and the rise of Guy of Lusignan threaten to undo everything Baldwin fought for. This is the story of his final struggle, a desperate attempt to preserve Jerusalem against the forces of decay, treachery, and time itself. And when the king who carried a kingdom on his ruined body finally falls, so too does the fate of Christendom in the East. Let us now enter the second part of Baldwin Ivy's story, deepening the drama and the political turmoil that surrounded the Leper King, and exploring in more detail his relationship with Saladin, the greatest Muslim leader of the time. If in the first part we saw Baldwin's rise, his astonishing victory at Montgisard, and his extraordinary courage in the face of illness, in this continuation, we will delve into the dark halls of Jerusalem's palace, where family rivalries, betrayals, and ambitions threatened the very survival of the kingdom. This is not only a tale of war, but of intrigue of siblings turned rivals, of nobles blinded by arrogance, and of a dying king struggling not merely against his disease, but against the collapse of everything he sought to preserve. After the glory of Montgisard in 1177, Baldwin Ivy's legend grew, yet his body continued to fail him. William of Tyre, who both chronicled and personally knew the king, wrote, "His spirit was stronger than his flesh, and though his hands and feet decayed, his judgment was sound. That judgment became essential, for Baldwin knew that the true danger did not lie only in Saladin's armies, but in the treacherous currents within his own court. The greatest problem was succession. Baldwin, stricken by leprosy, could have no children, and so the future of the kingdom depended on his sister, Sibylla. Sibylla was strong-willed, beautiful, and politically astute, but her choice of husband would define Jerusalem's fate. At first, Baldwin arranged her marriage to William of Montferrat, a nobleman of high standing. Tragically, William died only a year later, leaving Sibylla a widow with a young son, Baldwin V. This child, frail but full of promise, was seen as a possible heir, but in the meantime, Sibylla remarried, this time to Guy of Lusignan. Here, Baldwin's difficulties truly began. Guy was a French knight of minor importance, ambitious but lacking the respect of Jerusalem's barons. Baldwin quickly saw that Guy was arrogant, rash, and militarily inept, exactly the qualities that could ruin the fragile kingdom. Jonathan Phillips, in his The Crusades, 1095 to 1197, notes that Baldwin forerecognized Guy's flaws early on, writing, "The king's distrust of Lusignan was not born of jealousy, but of a clear vision that the kingdom required skill, not vanity." Baldwin tried to limit Guy's influence, first appointing him regent during his illness, but after Guy's failures in military leadership, Baldwin stripped him of that power. This move created a rift. Sibylla supported her husband fiercely, while Baldwin struggled to keep control of the throne and the loyalty of the nobility. Meanwhile, Saladin watched carefully from across the border. Unlike many FOs, he respected Baldwin deeply. Muslim chroniclers such as Ahmed ad-Din al-Isfahani described Baldwin as a leper. Yet more courageous than men of whole flesh, Saladin understood that while Baldwin lived, Jerusalem would not fall easily. This mutual recognition forged a strange bond of respect between the two leaders. Saladin, the sultan who dreamed of uniting Islam under his banner, and Baldwin, the dying king whose mere willpower held Christendom's last bastion in the east. Yet respect could not halt war. In the early 1180s, Baldwin faced renewed invasions. At the Battle of La Forbellet in 1182, though nearly blind and unable to mount his horse, Baldwin had himself carried into the field on a litter. Chronicler Arnold tells us, the sight of him, wasted by illness, carried by men yet still directing the battle, inspired the warriors more than 1,000 swords could have. His presence rallied the Crusaders, and Saladin's forces were once again forced to withdraw. Baldwin's courage, even in decay, remained a weapon as sharp as steel. But courage could not silence politics. Baldwin's greatest fear was that after his death, Guy of Lusignan would inherit the throne through Sibylla, and that this incompetent man would squander all that Baldwin had fought to preserve. In 1183, Baldwin attempted a desperate maneuver. He crowned his young nephew, Sibylla's son Baldwin V, as co-king by passing Guy. As Bernard Hamilton explains in The Leper King and His Heirs, this was a last dying attempt to ensure stability through an innocent child rather than a dangerous man, yet fate was cruel. Young Baldwin V would not live long after his uncle, and the path to Guy's rule would be reopened. By 1185, Baldwin IV's body was utterly broken. His face was ravaged, his eyesight nearly gone, and his limbs little more than bones. Yet he clung to his throne, determined to the very end. His final months were a struggle not only against Saladin, but against the encroaching shadow of death. William of Tyre's account is almost unbearable. He wasted away day by day, as wax melts before a fire, and yet his mind remained clear, sharper than any around him. Baldwin died that same year at only 24 years old, carried to his grave by nobles who wept for a king they had at times opposed, but whom they could not help but admire. And here lies the bitterest irony. Baldwin's foresight was correct. His death left the kingdom vulnerable. Within 2 years, Guy of Lusignan ascended as king, and in 1187 he led the Crusader army to catastrophe at the Battle of Hattin. Saladin destroyed the Crusader host and soon captured Jerusalem. As historian Stephen Runciman famously wrote in A History of the Crusades, the fall of Jerusalem was not the failure of a kingdom, but the failure of a man, Guy of Lusignan, who had inherited from a king far greater than himself. Baldwin, had he lived, might have saved the city. His death was not just the loss of a man, but the loss of Jerusalem's last true shield. Thus, Baldwin IV's story does not end in triumph, but in tragedy and prophecy fulfilled. He foresaw disaster, and he was powerless to prevent it. Yet his legacy remains one of the most compelling in medieval history. His leprosy, rather than destroying him, transformed him into a legend, the broken king who stood unbroken, the dying monarch who inspired life in his people, the man who faced Saladin not with strength of body, but with strength of will. When we think of kings, we imagine glory, wealth, and health. Baldwin reminds us that true kingship is not an outward form, but an inner resolve. Jonathan Riley Smith summarizes it best. Baldwin IV was not a king in spite of his leprosy, he was a king because of it. It was the illness that revealed his greatness, and so the tale of Baldwin IV concludes: a short reign, a broken body, but an immortal spirit. In him, we see not just the fragility of man, but the triumph of courage against despair. A young man, doomed from childhood, who held the line against Saladin and kept Jerusalem standing long enough for Christendom to rally one last time. His death was the kingdom's death knell, but his memory endures as proof that greatness can bloom even in the most cursed of circumstances.